Hi everyone, in today's latest video, we're going to make a squash stew. The squash itself became popular in Hungary in the 18th to 19th centuries, having arrived from the American continent. Incidentally, it was already known in Hungary in the 16th century, but it was mainly used as fodder. Let's quickly see what we need for the squash stew. Of course, the squash itself, dill, 5 tablespoons of sour cream, 3 tablespoons of flour, 50 grams of butter, salt to taste, and depending on your taste, if you like sugar, you can add it, though I usually don't, and vinegar. We're already starting to peel the squash. Don't be afraid to buy squash that isn't prepped. Hi there, I'm waving to you while I do this because it's really, really easy to peel. Of course, you can also buy ready-to-cook squash at the greengrocer or even use frozen squash. That's perfectly fine too. Now, while I'm peeling the squash, let me tell you that there are two ways to make squash stew. I actually prefer the other method, but I'll show you both. The other way is when you saute onions first, then add the squash on top and thicken it that way. But this time I'm not going to use onions and I won't be sauteing anything. I'll just put the squash straight into boiling water. See, peeling squash is really, really simple. You just need to cut off the ends. Those can go in the trash. And then basically I'm going to cut the squash in half and then it's time to grate it. Squash stew is actually an interesting thing because, for example, when I was a child, I really, really didn't like it. I remember spending 2 weeks at my grandma's during the summer, and when she made squash stew, she made it the red way, which means she added paprika to it, and she made an amazing stew sauce to go with it. She would always say, "At least try it, my little girl." And I did try it, and it was absolutely delicious. Since then, it's become one of my favorite dishes, and thank goodness my daughters love it too. The whole family loves it, so we make it very often. Now, as you can see, it's really easy to remove the inside of the squash with a regular spoon. I put this in a separate container and basically throw it away. I think it's clear that this is a very simple process, so really don't be afraid to buy a whole squash like this because I think you can peel and grate it in about 5 minutes, and honestly, it feels really good to do it yourself. As I mentioned, the family really loves squash stew, so we eat it all year round. You can absolutely buy it frozen or you can freeze it yourself. It keeps well in the freezer and handles freezing just fine. But in my opinion, it's always tastiest when it's fresh. So whenever I can get fresh squash, I always choose that. All right, let's quickly take a look at this second one as well. So after I'm done peeling the squash, I cut it in half because otherwise it would be too big for the grater, and then I start grating it. What's important is that for some reason, I didn't take out my usual classic grater this time, even though I usually grate the squash into long strips, but I didn't use that one now. But that's okay, because as you can see, you can easily grate it with a regular classic cheese grater too. It won't change the taste, and this will also result in those little elongated squash pieces in the end. All you have to do is grate it in about 3 to 4 minutes. By the way, it's a great arm workout. Here you can see that I cut the squashes in half again because otherwise they'd be too wide for the grater. If you have a classic squash grater at home, the kind that makes those long strips, that's even better, but honestly, I wouldn't worry about it. It'll turn out fine either way. In the meantime, I'm done with the squash. I ended up with a nice big bowl from these 2 to 2.5 kilos. Now comes the dill. I chopped up a lot of dill this time, which is about the equivalent of 2 bunches. At the store, we found this huge bunch of dill, so we bought it because you can freeze it and it keeps well. It's completely different using fresh dill compared to dried dill. I much prefer freezing it rather than using the dried dill that comes in a bag. The taste is really, really different. I'll put it in the freezer and it'll be great for the next dish. By the way, we just decided with my husband that we're going to make dill sauce, and I'll record that too. So I've put about a liter of water on to boil, and I'll add salt to it. This is where I'll put the squash in and cook it for a few minutes. But what's really important, since this is a quick dish, is that I start preparing the thickener. I'm going to use 5 tablespoons of sour cream for it. I'm going to add that to the thickener. I like it when it's more sour creamy. If I could, I'd put in the whole tub of sour cream, but I'm deliberately not making the recipe that way now because not everyone might like it as creamy as I do. But if I weren't filming this, I'd definitely put about 3 to 4 deciliters of sour cream into this dish. Now comes the flour, so I'm adding 3 tablespoons of flour. You can experiment with this. I don't make it the squash stew, and there are two reasons for that. One is that I'm cooking it for 2 days and it's certain to thicken by the next day, and I don't like it when the spoon stands upright in the dish. The other reason is that the girls absolutely love it and they much prefer it when the dish is more saucy. I poured in about a deciliter of water and I'm starting to mix it. It needs to be lump free, so you have to stir it until it has a nice smooth consistency. You get And I think you can see as I'm stirring that it's coming together really nicely. And basically, our squash has already been cooking in the pot for about 5 to 6 minutes. But you have to wait until the water comes back to a boil, because when I put the squash in, it cooled down the boiling water. I'll give it about another 5 minutes with the lid on, and then we'll continue with the. So the 5 minutes are up, and now I'm going to add the dill. All the dill goes in and we mix it thoroughly. If you feel like the water needs more salt, it's worth adding some now. Some people also like to add garlic. I've done it that way before and it's really delicious. Now let's continue with the thickening. I transfer 2 or 3 tablespoons of the liquid from the stew into the mixed sour cream. And then after all the previous steps are completed, all we have to do is carefully pour it back into the pot, making sure not to spill any, stir it in thoroughly so everything is well combined, and then let the dish come to a boil again over medium heat. Once it comes to a boil, it's basically done, ready to serve and eat hot and fresh. I'll leave you with a helpful trick at the end. Try adding 50 grams of butter to the stew, and you'll notice it will have a completely different flavor, something incredibly silky and smooth, like in the best stews you've ever tasted. This little addition can really elevate the dish and make it extra special. It makes the dish so creamy, it's just incredible. And of course, butter has a divine flavor. It's not mandatory to add it, but it really, really does wonders for the dish. Let it come to a boil one more time, and it's done. I'm going to serve this now with stew. We also love it with meatballs. I've already uploaded various stew videos. I have a so-called lazy stew that I usually make for this, but I always keep a bit in the freezer. This is what the dish looks like when it's finished. As I mentioned at the beginning, you also need to add vinegar. I don't usually cook it with the vinegar because not everyone in the family likes it that way, but I personally really, really love it when there's vinegar in it. It just tastes completely different. That's why we usually add it afterwards, and honestly, it's best eaten with soft, delicious white bread. Try it. It's incredibly delicious. I'll upload the other version as well, and you can see the recipe here. Thank you so much for watching the channel. Almost 30,000 people have watched it so far, but it would be really important if you could also please hit the subscribe button because I need that too. Thank you and come back for the next video. Bye.